Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Our Home Ground. I am so happy to be here today, just like I am every week. So, this is so fun and exciting. Today, I wasn't really sure what I was going to talk about because, if I'm being really honest, I've been like glued to the Winter Olympics and a little bit less glued to the women's soccer of it all. But there's still plenty of things to talk about. And then this morning, all of the national team rosters dropped. So that really sparked some things for me. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about the WSL matches over the weekend. Even though I know last episode I said I was going to stop doing that as much, I am a little bit, you'll see, I feel like it's a little bit different than how I used to do it. And I do think there were some talking points over the weekend that we need to talk about. And then we will talk a little bit about some of the international stuff and like what's going on the international stage in this upcoming FIFA window because there's a lot and it's fun and exciting. So let's just hop right into it. Let's talk about the WSL matches over the weekend. So, first of all, on Friday, Man City beat Leicester City 6-0. Looks like they rebounded from that loss against Arsenal perfectly fine. They came out, completely dominated Leicester City. Not that that's overly surprising, but just always interesting to see how like a dominant team bounces back to a loss when they're not really used to losing. Seems like they were just fine. And then all the other games were on Sunday. So on Sunday, Chelsea beat Liverpool 2-0. Only reason I think this matters is because when they met earlier in the season, it was a draw. 0-0, I think, maybe 1-1. Actually, don't remember the score, but it was a draw. And that was like everybody starts like, oh my gosh, is Chelsea gonna lose this season? Turns out, yes, they are. But Chelsea did win this one pretty handily, 2-0. Never really seemed that close. United beat London City 2-1. The reason this matters is because United, Chelsea, and Arsenal are in a really tight race for this second and third place in the league, and that determines who qualifies for Champions League. I keep talking about that. So if you've missed that in the past, sorry, I don't know how, but United's winning, Chelsea's winning, making things difficult. Arsenal beats City, Arsenal beats Chelsea. It's really tight still to determine who is going to qualify for Champions League. So it's exciting. Like every game is must win for all of these teams. And I feel like it's been a while, at least none of the years that I've closely followed the WSL has this really been the case that like all of the teams, well, I guess not. Even for City, it's sort of like every game's a must win. I think they can afford to lose like one game maybe, but it's must win for most of them. And it just makes it really fun and exciting to like follow along. So there's that. The craziest game of the weekend was Aston Villa lost 7-3. 7-3. That is 10 goals to Tottenham. And this is such an insane scoreline. Tottenham scored 7 goals. There's actually only been one WSL game that has ever scored more goals in a single match. And that was an 11-1 victory. So 12 goals versus the 10 goals this weekend. It was an 11-1 victory for Arsenal over Bristol City in like December of 2019. So it's been a really long time since any scoreline has been this high. So that's really crazy. And I just heard one of the Tottenham players after the match, somebody was asking them sort of like, what changed? And she said, she's like, our coach just told us to be ruthless in front of goal. We're making opportunities. We just need to capitalize on all of them. And we did that today. And it's like, yeah, you did 7 times. You really did. So not that I'm ever actually happy for Tottenham. That's not true. But just crazy. They are actually tied on points with Arsenal right now, which we'll get into that in a second. But they're fifth in the table. They're having a great season. Very exciting for them. Everton beat West Ham 1-0. Talking point here is the race at the bottom of the table to try not to get relegated. Well, this season it's really to try not to be in the playoff game for relegation is tight. Everton beat West Ham 1-0. Everton is on a 3-game win streak in the league. They've won 3 league games in a row for the first time since January of 2023. Very exciting. They have a new coach. I don't think we've talked about that directly on here. Everton sacked their coach and their assistant coach. I think they were like, we need to start over. And this is the first coach Everton has had that has won their first 2 league games, at least in a very long time, potentially ever. So this is very exciting for them. And then finally, the last game of the weekend, and the one that we're going to talk about now and for a little bit, is the game that didn't happen. So Brighton and Hove Albion was supposed to host Arsenal on Sunday afternoon, but that game was called off due to a waterlogged pitch. Importantly, the referee is the only person who decides if the game will go on or not. They make that decision. It's not the WSL, it's not the host, stadium, or team, or anything like that. So the referee called it off. The most controversial part of this game being called off is that they waited until 95 minutes before kickoff to call off the game, which really is quite close because I think players can come out and warm up on the field like 45 minutes. So it was less than an hour before like warm ups are supposed to start. Although I don't live in England, I have seen so many things about how rainy it has been there. Like, I think there's only been one day in all of 2026 so far, like a month and a half, where there has been no rain. And that was actually on Saturday. I read that Saturday, the day before this game was supposed to play, was the only day that, at least for the south of England, has not had any rain this entire 2026 so far. So, not surprised that the pitch is waterlogged. And this is a pitch where they do tend to have issues with the elements. Actually, a game Arsenal was supposed to play at this same Crawley, I think is where it was. Like 3 years ago, they were scheduled to play there, and the game also got called off. Also, kind of last minute, is my understanding as I read back into this. And so, people are pretty unhappy. And I was actually really surprised by the response that I saw online to this. To say that people were unhappy feels like a really big understatement. People were pissed. And the argument that I continued to see was that people were saying that they waited too long to call off the game. Fans had already traveled. For those of you who don't know the geography of England, Brighton is in like the very south of England. It is south of London. I would imagine from the Emirates, where Arsenal normally plays, to Brighton is roughly a 2 hour drive. So it's not close. And so these traveling fans have potentially come quite a distance just for the game to be called off. So it costs money on either train tickets or like gas and stuff. They were already like at the pub. You'd imagine that they've already like gotten a drink, gotten whatever, you know. So people were really, really mad that they waited so long to call it off. And I think I have a lot of thoughts on this. So number one, Brighton plays in a 6,000 person stadium. So it's a small stadium that has had issues with elements in the past. I think people were arguing, no, I know people were arguing that the game should have been called off earlier. The argument is they knew earlier in the day that the pitch wasn't going to be playable. Number one, maybe they did, but they were hoping and doing everything that they could. Reportedly, they had this huge like fan blowing onto the pitch, trying to like move the water, dry off the pitch, whatever. It was pouring down rain, I understand. But they were doing everything they can to have the game play because postponing the game at this point in the season, it's already the middle of February. It's a game against Arsenal. Arsenal is involved still in the FA Cup and Champions League, plus regular league games. There's so much congestion in the schedule that trying to find another day to play this game is like impossible, basically. Not that this weighed into this game being postponed or not, but Arsenal really didn't want this game postponed because Arsenal already has a game in hand because their game against Leicester got postponed because of like a frozen pitch, I think. So Arsenal now has two games in hand. They have two more games to play than everyone else. And like where? They won 4-0 against Leuven last week, so it's all but decided that they will be going through to the quarterfinals. They played Chelsea. They have a very good chance of winning against Chelsea in the quarterfinals, which would put them through to the semifinals. Semifinals are not played midweek games, they are played on the weekends. So there will be two more games, theoretically, that might have to be moved, which is like four league games since after Christmas that will have to be moved and found some other time to play. Like it's just, it gets absurdly difficult. Not that Arsenal had any say over whether or not this game got postponed, because, like I said, only the referee gets to decide that. The referee had to be there. So part of the reason that it was only 95 minutes before that it called off was like the referee had to actually be there to make that call. And they wanted to play the game. The ref wanted to play the game. The league wanted them to play the game. Brighton wanted them to play the game. Arsenal wanted to play the game. Like everybody wanted to play. And if we set these like arbitrary, I heard a lot of discussion online about like, well, we should just set like 3 hours before kickoff. If you're going to call it, then you have to call it. Otherwise, the game hold on. Then so many games are going to get postponed that don't need to get postponed. And at the end of the day, this game was postponed to protect the players. And if we are going to claim that we want to protect player safety, which so many of us claim, I make that claim that player safety should be number one. That's why we talk about the schedule congestion. That's why we talk about which stadiums they're playing in, pitch conditions, all of these things. It's all about player safety. If we're going to claim that we care about that above everything else, then we can't be mad that this game got postponed. Like, I'm sorry. I get that you traveled there. I get that you got there early. And I get that it's frustrating. All of that can also be true. But to say that it was somehow wrong for this to be called off in the way that it was, to me, is not it. Because at the end of the day, remember when Arsenal played Real Madrid on that horrific pitch in Madrid, and everyone was so mad about the waterlogged pitch, and Emily Fox slid like freaking half the length of the field? Like, it everyone was mad about that. And the condition would have been that, if not worse, if they would have played on Sunday. And everyone was mad then, but now you're mad that we're not playing. Like, it can't be both. You can be frustrated that you had already traveled there. That's fine. You're allowed to be frustrated. But I don't think that it's fair to say that it was not right or shouldn't have been done, or even the manner that it was done was wrong, because I genuinely can't think of a better way. You assess the pitch as close to game time as you can to give it as much time as you can to be playable. This pitch was covered in plastic covering to try to keep as much of the water off as they could to avoid the waterlog situation. So if you take it all off early, you're exposing it to elements. So if it was like playable, but a little bit iffy, then you've now exposed it to the elements, say 3 hours earlier than you needed to, then it's not going to be playable come game time, right? Like, I really don't see a better way. And I get that it's frustrating, but that's just the reality of playing a sport outside that the elements are involved in. And I just think that's the reality. There's also this whole argument that it should have been played in the Amex, which is like Brighton's big stadium where the men play. Number one, not that I like to use this excuse, but it was a men's FA Cup weekend, so it was possible that the men would be drawn to play at home, and then the women's fixture would have gotten moved, and people would have been really mad about that. The men did get drawn to play like away at Liverpool or something, I think. So theoretically, it could have been like moved once that draw was made. But the thing about Brighton is they are building a stadium directly for the women's team. So the women's team is not going to play at the Amex. It's not like that is going to become their home field. So there is no real motivation for them to get the women to that field because that will never be their home ground. Their home ground will be this new facility that they're building just for the women. And so, like, it doesn't make sense for them to play at the Amex. It's not part of their club vision. And yes, Arsenal has so many resources and they can play games at the Emirates and all of these things. But first of all, they don't even play every game there. They play all their league games there, but any of the cup games, including Champions League games, are played at the small stadium. So keep that in mind. And the amount of like logistics, personnel, and money required to move a game to the bigger stadium last minute is just like unreal. And they shouldn't do it just because they're playing against Arsenal. Would people have expected them to do this if they were playing a team that was lower in the table? I don't think that they would have. And so, like, I don't think we should be treating different specific teams differently. I don't know. And maybe I'll regret saying that, but I just think that this just sucks. It's just frustrating. And on the note of player health that I was talking about, like, yeah, the congestion of the schedule and getting postponed isn't good either, but there like wasn't a good outcome here. The good outcome here would be that it doesn't rain for 655 days in a row in England and the pitch was playable and everything could be fine. But that's just not the reality of the situation. And so we'll just have to see what happens and how this game gets put in. And so, yeah, all of this to say, that's the WSL weekend wrap up. The table sits Man City 1, I think United 2, Chelsea 3, Arsenal 4, tied on points with Tottenham in 5, but ahead in goal differential. Though theoretically, Arsenal does have 2 games in hand that theoretically they would be expected to win. And so if they did win both of those games as they would be expected to, they would get 6 more points, which would actually put them in second. So it's like a weird place to be right now. with the whole thing, but it is what it is. And that's what happened in the WSL this weekend. A little bit crazy. Actually, a lot of crazy stuff happened this weekend. And of course, that would happen right after I was like, I'm not going to be talking about the games anymore. Well, here I am talking about the games. So, what can you do? But I think that's all I have to say about that. So, let's move along to the international window. So we're coming up to this international window, which to me is always really fun and exciting. I love following club football and I love following the national teams. Like, I think it's so fun to have both. I love when club rivals get to play together on the same national team, and then they like go back and have to be teammates again. Like, I just think it's so fun in like both ways when club teammates go back to their national teams and they play each other. Like, I love it. I live for this kind of stuff. So there are a couple of different things that I think are really exciting that are going on. We're going to talk about like sort of three groups of things that are going on during this international window that are very fun. First of all, the one I am probably most excited for, partially because I get to attend one of the games, is that the U.S. Women's National Team is hosting the She Believes Cup. If you don't know what the She Believes Cup is, let me introduce you to your new favorite meaningless tournament. So, this is a four-team tournament that they have every spring, and it literally means nothing. They go down as friendlies. They don't count any differently for FIFA as like a tournament or whatever. But there is a trophy at the end, and usually pretty strong teams come and play it. This year and in the past couple of years, it's looked a little bit different because Europe has sort of changed the way that they're doing things. England used to often come play. Japan has often come and played this tournament. Neither of those teams are here this year. We'll talk about that in a little bit as to why that is. But this year, the tournament will include the US Women's National Team, obviously, they're the hosts, Canada, Argentina, and Colombia, which I think will be really interesting games. And I'm really, really excited about all of them for different reasons. I'm not going to talk about each one in detail in a preview because I am not equipped to do that. It's always spicy when the US Women's National Team plays Colombia, and then the US Women's National Team in Canada is a huge rivalry game. So fun. And I'm excited to see what Argentina can bring. I think it'll be good. So, She Believes Cup, there are three match days with every team playing every other team. I would say round robin, but I think that's only for like three people. It's like a group stage kind of situation where everybody plays everybody, but there will be a winner. And no game ends in a tie. This time, this is new. They have changed the rules. It used to be that a game could end in a tie. Now, the way that it works is if the tie is score, what? If the score is tied at the end of regular time, it just immediately goes to penalties. There is no sort of like the 30-minute extra time situation does not exist. It goes straight to penalties. And so if you win, you get 3 points. If you tie, you get 1 point. And then if you win the penalty shootout, your team gets the one extra point. So there will be an outright winner. Hopefully it's the US Women's National Team because although this tournament doesn't mean anything, it's one of my favorite tournaments because of all of the lore and jokes about Emily Sonnett in this tournament. So the US plays in this tournament every year. They host it every year. And it just like randomly came up one time that Emily Sonnett and Alyssa Nair, but Alyssa is a goalie, so I think we think about that a little bit differently. Emily Sonnett is the most decorated She Believes Cup outfield player of all time. And her teammates, especially like Rose Lavelle and Lindsay, then Haran, now Heaps, just made this like huge deal about the fact that like She Believes is like Sonnett's tournament. And there are all these jokes of how like nobody She Believes harder than Emily Sonnett. And it was so funny. So many jokes to the point that US Soccer literally released a Sonnett Believes Cup shirt or like line of merch last year for the She Believes Cup. The US actually didn't win it last year. Japan did, so like that didn't go that well. But I am just waiting for Sonnett to become the player who has won it the most times because right now she is tied with Listenair. Um, but if she is to win, Listenair has not retired. So if she wins another one, namely this year's, she would have her coveted eighth She Believes trophy. And I hope it happens just because all of the like social media posts from all of her friends, all the content we get from US Women's National Team is just so funny about it. And because Sonnet is like so awkward about it and everybody like hypes it up like it means something and it doesn't. And everyone knows that it doesn't. everyone, especially Sonnet, like she knows, she's like, what is going on? But I just think it's so fun and so silly. And I love seeing the girls be fun and silly. So, really excited about that. That roster did drop today. I don't plan on talking through any of these rosters, but there are some interesting people not included in that roster. So, if you have thoughts on it, let me know because I certainly do. Another exciting thing that's happening this window is the second two-match pairing of the World Cup qualifying in Europe. They're in group stage of their World Cup qualifying tournament. It's not Nations League question mark. I like thought it was Nations League, but then when I looked up on the internet, it just says like World Cup qualifying. It doesn't say Nations League. I don't know. They're in the group stage for World Cup qualifying. So I'll just run through a couple of the games that are playing over there in Europe. Some of the big teams who we would expect to qualify. Only the first place person in each group, first place team in each group qualifies outright. There is another qualification process. It's not that if they don't outright qualify, they don't qualify at all. That's not the case. There are other avenues to get there because like Spain and England are in the same group, so one of them won't qualify outright. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to the World Cup because that would be crazy. So, anyways, this window, England will play Iceland and Ukraine. Spain, being in the same group, will also play Iceland and Ukraine. Ireland is playing, and Ireland is in, they're back in the like A division of the Nations League. They had been in the B division. They got promoted back to the A division, which is the most straightforward and easiest way to qualify for the World Cup. So that was like huge for them, that they were able to get back into the A group. I don't actually know all of the technical terminology for it, but here we are. So Ireland is in the same group as France and Netherlands and Poland, but they are playing France and Netherlands. Netherlands is playing Poland and then obviously Ireland, and then France will also play Ireland and Poland. So those I think will be some really interesting games that I'm really excited to watch. Germany will be playing Slovenia and Norway, and Sweden will be playing Italy and Serbia. There are so many other games that will be happening this international window, both in Europe and elsewhere in the Americas. So please look out for some of those games. It's always really good, fun competition on the international stage. So I'm really excited to be watching some of, if not all of those games. And then the third thing that I am second most excited about, potentially most excited about because it actually means something. She Believes Cup is just so silly and I like love all the lore with it. But the thing that I'm probably actually the most excited about and have been really looking forward to is the Asian Cup that is taking place in Australia is also this window. It'll actually go longer than the FIFA window that the other federations have. This for them, for the Asian Federation, it is longer because this is their major tournament for this Asian Federation. It's like their version of the Euros. We don't really have one in the US, or it's like not a big deal. The one for North America is like not as big of a deal as the Euros, but AFCON happened over the summer as well, and then the one for South America as well, which I should know what it's called. CONMEBOL, or is I always forget. Yeah, CONMEBOL is the one for South America and CONCACAF is the one for North America. I always get them confused because they're like all these like long letters that don't actually make any sense. So WAFCON was over the summer. CONMEBOL was over the summer as well. Brazil won that. CONCACAF is in November, I think. Asian Cup is happening right now. And then Euros were over the summer as well. So very exciting. Also important to remember, Australia is part of the Asian Federation. That happened a few years ago just based on like dominance and competition and all kinds of things. So this is a 12-team tournament with three groups. The top two teams from each group advance, and then the top two third place teams advance. So if you watched the Olympics in 2024, this is the same as the way that that worked. So I'll talk through each of the groups because I'm so excited about this tournament. Group A is Australia, Korea Republic, Islamic Republic of Iran, and the Philippines. Group B is DPR Korea, China PR, Bangladesh, and Uzbekistan. And then Group C is Japan, Vietnam, India, and Chinese Taipei. So there's going to be so much good footy to watch, and I actually hate the time difference because it's going to be really difficult for me to watch because I have a full-time job now. When the 2023 World Cup was in Australia and New Zealand, I was working in a restaurant and in grad school, so I could like stay up all hours of the night and watch these games. Now I have like a 9 to 5, so it's going to be much harder. But I'm going to watch as many games as I can live and then watch replays because this is just going to be so fun and I'm so excited about it. I really have my eye on Group A for multitude of reasons. Obviously, they have the host nation, Australia. Since the 2023 World Cup, Australia has tended to draw huge crowds. So I'm imagining they're going to have a huge, like, home field crowd advantage everywhere they go. Korea Republic is also often a good team. So I think they'll be very competitive. And the team that I'm watching the closest in this group is Philippines. I've got a really close eye on them. They just won the Southeast Asian Games, beating the host nation Thailand in the semifinals, and then they went on to beat the defending champions Vietnam in a penalty shootout. The Southeast Asian Games, or the SEA Games, were in December of 25, so a couple months ago. Vietnam was like a heavy favorite to win it. I think most people were assuming they would win it. Philippines actually beat them in the group stage 1-0, and then they ended up going to a penalty shootout in the final, and they won. Philippines won. It was so exciting. It was fabulous. I do know one of the players who plays for Philippines, Angie Beard. She is fabulous. Shout out, Ange. I will be watching and cheering you on all the way. Lovely, lovely gal, incredible footballer. She's just so great. So very, very excited for her. This is a really fun and big deal for them. The SEA Games, it was the first time the Filipinas had won the SEA Games, and I anticipate that they'll be sort of riding that momentum into this tournament. So I think they're going to be a tough competition that people should not underestimate. And I just think overall this is going to be a really, really fun tournament. So yeah, I did note at the top of this that this tournament is longer than the actual sort of like FIFA window for other federations. So that means that club play will begin again while these players are still at the tournament, assuming their teams go far enough. I did see on one of the social media pages, and I'm sorry that I don't know which one that it was. I follow so many, but somebody had posted that of Japan's roster that they selected for the Asian Cup, 16 of the players play in the WSL. Japan is a heavy favorite to run really far in this Asian Cup. They are a favorite to win. Imagine I worry about them. I think they are a very, very strong team. So I wonder what that does to potential like WSL clubs who are fighting to win the league and those kinds of things. Because like Man City, their goalie and their midfield really relies on Japanese players. And so I think that'll be really interesting. Many other clubs throughout the WSL, clearly there are 16 players. They don't all play for Man City, rely on Japanese players and play big roles in their teams. Also, couple of the top teams, Arsenal and Chelsea, to name a few, rely on strong Australian players to help their teams be successful. Players like Steph Catley for Arsenal, Caitlin Ford, Kyra Cooney-Cross, and then for Chelsea, Sam Kerr, Ellie Carpenter. Big players for these teams that hopefully for their sake will be gone for a while and run deep into this Asian Cup tournament. So it'll be interesting because as we look ahead in the schedule for club games, Arsenal theoretically will be playing Chelsea in the quarterfinals of the Women's Champions League because Arsenal beat Leuven 4-0 last week. They play again, actually, tomorrow or on the day that this podcast comes out. So, I mean, theoretically, Leuven could still win, but they'd have to beat Arsenal by 5 goals, which I just find highly, highly unlikely. So that will, if they don't do that and Arsenal, moves through, the first leg of the Arsenal-Chelsea quarterfinal for the Champions League is March 24th. The final for the Asia Cup is March 21st. So just for player safety, I hope that if Australia makes it that far in the tournament, which I hope that they do, and even so, the like playoff game, I think for like third and fourth, the part of this Asian Cup is also they're qualifying for the World Cup, and so there's some like extra games, even if you're not like in the final or semifinal, there's like some extra games to determine qualification for the World Cup. So there's a really good chance that Australia will be playing games through the 21st if they make the final, or like I think the 19th at the very earliest they would be done. And so for player health, I do worry about Australians like flying all the way back to London to be playing in a game on the 24th. So I think it would be really interesting to see an Arsenal with no Steph Catley, Caitlin Ford, or Kyra Cooney-Cross playing a Chelsea with no Sam Kerr and no Ellie Carpenter. I just think it would be so interesting. They would all hopefully be back for the April 1st second leg. So excited to see how that changes things. There's just always so much going on with the schedule and the women's game and all the things. So it's exciting, and I can't wait to watch the Asian Cup. I can't wait to watch the She Believes Cup. I will be at the game in Nashville on March 1st. So if anybody's going to be there, would love to see you, say hi. But yeah, I'm just so excited. What an exciting time to be following women's soccer. It is so fun and so exciting. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the international stage. I do want to say one follow-up comment to the podcast episode that I did last week, which was really not fun to record, but here we are. Casey Wasserman has announced that he is selling his company, though I do think that's good. I I wish he would have just like stepped down because he's going to make a lot of money by selling it. But I think the fact that he's going to be not involved is good enough. Abby Wambach, who is just like my goat, my favorite of all time. She's who got me into women's soccer to begin with. Left the agency. She was still represented by Wasserman. She did leave the agency. I imagine she'll go back to her agent after he sells. In her comment or like post that she put out saying that she was leaving the agency, she did say, like, I want to thank my agent who I've known for 20 years. Like, this is really hard. So, like, I get that. I do believe she is the only women's soccer player who said anything. And like I said, Wasserman represents a lot of women's soccer players. So I find that a little bit disappointing, especially when it's people like Megan Rapinoe, who has been outspoken about needing to be outspoken and then didn't say anything. So, anyways, hopefully that's the last thing about that, and we can sort of move along from that as it relates to women's soccer. Certainly, it is affecting so much more of my life that I'm not talking about on this podcast. So, anyways, if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. Which national games are you? International games? I never know what to call them. Whatever. Which games are you looking forward to most in this FIFA international window? Anybody watching the Asian Cup? Let me know who you think's gonna win the Asian Cup. I genuinely don't know. I think if I had to put money on the table, I would say Japan, but I'm rooting the hardest for Philippines and then Australia. But we'll just see what happens. I think it'll be so fun and so exciting. And then obviously, I think the US Women's National Team is going to win the She Believes Cup, and Sonnett is going to have her eighth She Believes Cup. And then maybe we'll actually rename it Sonnett Believes Cup because everybody knows that She Believes Cup is like such a stupid name for it. So, anyways, hope everybody has a great week, and I will see you next time.